On today's episode, we talked about pets. Why are pets so important in the grieving process? Why do people in funeral homes have pets as their grief therapists? And why pets are cool.
And why it's so hard to lose them.
Let's talk about it, Nick.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Welcome. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing good, Nick.
Be a fun episode. Let's talk about pet deaths, Ben.
Let's talk about pets with death.
Or pet deaths. I mean, it kind of
I don't like what you said,
summarizes
so let's
that.
just keep going. So, how important are pets, Nick, to you?
To me or
yeah, to you
to what I know?
specifically. Like, what do you think about pets right now?
I think pets are one of the best companions you can have for telling secrets. They're going to love you for who they are. I think the best part about pets, honestly, is that they're always in the here and now, which is something us humans struggle with. Pets don't hold grudges. They're not worried about anything but what's happening.
I'm gonna say something.
Right now.
I'm gonna say something, and I think you'll 100% agree with this. One of the people that I really looked up to in the last 5 years said to me something, and I was like, I you know what? That's 100% true. If you put your wife and you put your dog in the back of a car, right, in the trunk, you
Sure.
lock them in there. When you open the trunk, who's gonna be more happier to see you?
It's a very good question. I would follow it up. That's very abusive either way, so please
It
don't
is,
do
but
that.
the idea is that's unconditional love of a pet.
Right.
Pets have unconditional love. They don't care what you do. They care about you.
Well, I mean, eventually
They
do.
care about being fed. That's
Well, no. Pets have a deeper connection. That's why we use animals all the time to help with anxiety and depression. There's therapy dogs out there. There is therapy animals. I don't want to just classify this under dogs. I'm a dog person. Nothing against cat people. Just
Nick,
I'm a dog guy.
Can I
dog
ask you
lover.
not to be so boring about
And I love horses.
horses, huh?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
I hope one day I can get some autism horses, to not autistic horses.
That would be nice, Nick.
But horses
let's-
that help
let-
with
let-
autism.
Let's talk about death and pets, right? So to begin with, we can go back to the Egyptians because they would bury the king, right?
The royal pets.
Yeah, with their cats, right? Because they
The
believe
pharaoh's kitty
cats
cats.
go on to the afterlife.
Yeah.
So they would literally bury a cat
Well,
alive.
and cats have a lot of
With
stigmas
their-
to them.
Can
Like
I fi-
old
can I finish my
thought
sentence,
processes.
or-
No, because it wasn't going anywhere.
Well, it was the idea, right? The Egyptians, they would bury their cats. Like the royal Egyptians would bury their cats with them.
I think they mummified some of them. Maybe. Don't quote me on that, but I think
Don't
they did.
quote Nick on that because he doesn't know anything. But the idea is,
You know what? You can write me and tell me if that's incorrect.
feel free to write us at.
And
Let's Talk
sorry
About Death
to the
pod
ancient
at-
Egyptian civilization.
No,
if I
but
said that wrong.
they would bury their cats with them. That is known.
Okay.
That is known, especially the
I'm talking about the mummification.
the kings.
Never mind.
Not
Moving
kings. What are they called? Pharaohs, sorry. The pharaohs would be buried with their cats.
But I've had in my experience, I've had a lot of clients who are super close to their pets, and for multitudes of reasons. But a lot of what I know about pets, and especially for someone who is, you just lost a family, a loved one, a spouse, maybe after 50 years, and you have this dog that's still there. So at least you don't go home to an empty house. I mean, we are a very, the human society is a very community-based. We need people, but ultimately...
We don't want to be alone. We don't want to be alone.
Right, but ultimately, a pet can be that person for someone. It can be, not necessarily, a person, but, it's at least something for people to grasp onto.
Let me go a little further, Nick. Let's switch that. Let me do the psychology thing here, which you're not used to. What about the dog itself or the cat itself? I've been to so many families where I go into the house and I do the removal, right? Which the removal means I come in and I take your loved one back to the funeral home. And the dog knows exactly what I'm doing.
How do they know that, Ben? Do they tell you?
They do. I'm a dog whisperer, also a cat whisperer, and a horse whisperer, Nick. So if you want horses, you got to talk to me. But the idea is they know. They know what's going on because they're
Absolutely.
very timid about the situation. In fact, I've gone into a house where dogs have been on the bed.
There's a strong
almost as don't take, him or her away.
There's a strong bond between pets and humans, especially if there's a mutual love. You see these videos all the time of these Marines and Army people coming home after, 2 years or not being home, and the dog is like,
Or
"You're
the
back,
dog showing
you're
up
back.
at the,
I'm
at the
so
grave.
glad you're here.
Or the
Where
dog,
have you been?"
or the dog showing up at the grave.
Yeah, well,
10 miles away.
Or dogs finding their way home. You can leave some dogs in the middle of nowhere and they'll find their way home. It's an in tune thing, and I think there's something beautiful about it. I know that there's some dogs out there that will literally know if someone's about to have a diabetic situation.
Nick,
They'll come and literally be like, "Wake up! You need to take your medicine."
I had a really cool dog trainer, and we're gonna talk more about this in this episode. But I had this dog trainer that was telling me that he trains his dogs for diabetic patients, and they can literally bring them their pouch when they know that person's having like a sugar low.
Yeah, blood sugar. Yep. They
Like
smell
the
it.
idea
They
that
can feel
not only do they know that you need to have this now, but the idea is they'll bring it to them. So the idea of a dog knowing before you do that you need sugar or you need your insulin shot is like incredible. How many of these dogs are saving these people's lives?
Well, and that's a big point, and I want to clarify that not only can dogs physically save you, but they can also emotionally save you too. And I think that's the deeper thing with people that get really attached to their pets is there is an emotional balance that this dog or this cat or this horse or whatever animal it is brings to this person.
Yeah, and I don't want to go into just dog, but the cats are pretty cool too, and there's some things that cats have done that are incredible. So I don't want to
They're
just
sneaky.
specifically.
Just not into sneakiness.
Yeah, cats are sneaky. Let's talk about that. An email, if anybody wants to leave us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. Can we talk about how cats are sneaky?
Or actually, if you could give us a story about your pet, if they've saved your
That'd
life
be
in some way,
really
that'd be
cool.
really cool.
So there are some dogs that are trained to be grief therapy dogs. How does that work? Ben, what does that mean? How do I be as cool as you? First, I can't help you to be as cool as Ben Capal. That's a very tough thing. But I can tell you a little bit about the grief therapy dogs. So I have had their opportunity. I went to a couple conventions where I've got to meet some of these dogs, and they're awesome. They're absolutely awesome. And it's really cool because it goes back to, you've probably met some therapy dogs or some sort of like professional dogs, and you realize if they're wearing their collar, they're working.
Yep.
So they tell you, like, realize you can do whatever you want, just like don't play with them, like just, because they're working, they're doing their thing. So the idea is if they have their collar on, please don't, feed them. They're working.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked, like, how does that work in the funeral home business? Because that's what we're talking about, right? Let's talk about the ethnic. So I said, how does that work? Like, what do they do? Like, what makes them grief dogs, right, compared to therapy dogs? What's the difference, right? So I was told that they have, like, extremely different commands. Like, one of them is they'll go up and they'll lay on your lap.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll put their head, Nick, on your leg.
Right, and we know that petting a dog actually releases endorphins in our brains, which helps with depression and anxiety. It's a natural coping thing that happens in our brain when we are petting a dog.
But they go even further, Nick. They go to the point where they'll sit and wait for you.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
We
And
know
then I
that
was
dogs are
thinking,
very in
like,
tune into emotions, but more than humans are.
Let's look at this a comedic way. Like, do you think that dogs ever like, man, why does this guy not want to pet me? I'm going out of my way. Like, man, I'm hoping
That's
I
their
get this
job.
treat. I get this treat. And I hear that
Sometimes
they know how
we
to
all
like,
hate our
sit on
jobs,
a
right? Let's
lap.
just be frank
They
about
know
it.
how to like lap. They know how to like go up, and some of them know how to like go as like a baby, so they can hold them as a baby.
Mm-hmm. It'd be
That's
hard with the bigger
really,
dogs.
really
I feel
cool.
like.
But I was thinking,
do
like,
that,
what
but-
if that dog miscommunicates one person, right? Because there's some people that don't like dogs. I've met them. And usually they're.
Well, then I think
I don't want to hang out with them, but
I think the dog would actually read that. The dog are very
no. But like,
in
do you
tune
think
to
every
people's
once
emotions.
in a while they don't get it?
Well,
Right,
they
'cause
probably
we're
make
humans,
mistakes.
right?
There.
So like,
I mean, I mean, let's humanize it a little
I'm
bit.
thinking
The
of
dogs
this like
are a
big dog that like jumps into this lap, right? Because they're always like labradoodles, right? So in labradoodles,
They're
come
not
like,
always labradoodles,
they're
but
usually
there's a lot of
labradoodles.
labradoodles.
So usually they're like 3 sizes. So like there's a small labradoodle,
And then
which
there's
is
the
basically
horse.
like, and then there's a horse, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, do you imagine like that big one's like, that person needs me? Like jumps in that lap, and that person wants nothing to do with them. I have the knowledge of knowing a colleague of mine.
You have the
one.
knowledge of knowing?
And I have the knowledge of knowing. That sounds like a mouthful. And she said it's really cool because I forget that sometimes this dog is there. She said, so the problem is the arrangement room is going really bad. And sometimes it happens. Sometimes you just can't feel the room or they don't feel you. It's one way or another. And she goes, oh, let's call Sandy in.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, it's like usually a night like a 180.
Night and day. Yep.
You know, the dog comes in. Oh, Philip loved dogs. I didn't realize how important these dogs are. Nick, let's talk about people with pets. Do you want to start first on the psychology side of this? Like, is there a difference now with pets than there was maybe 10, 20 years ago?
Well, I think, the olden days when Gus was starting to feel ill and you took him out back and you pulled out a rifle and that was that. I don't think that really happens that much anymore. I think that animals have been really, I think for a lot of people, animals have become basically a therapy dog without being a therapy dog. And I think some people take it as far as there's people that, weren't blessed with kids or never got married or whatever. And I think they look at their pets as children. So a puppy is a baby in their mind. And as and that goes through the dog's life and then the dog dies. It's like losing a child for them. So there is some people out there, and there's probably a lot more than, a lot of people would actually think, but there's a lot of people out there that really do see their pets as their kids, and call them their kids. So it's important to note that, when people are talking about their pets, you might not be really interested in it, but it's just like a parent talking about their children. Like there's a lot of parents out there that like to tell you what their child is doing day to day. And I think for a lot of people that gets boring and annoying. And can we talk about something else? Problem is when these people look at...
he ate his lettuce today.
Nope. Moving on. Some of these people that are talking about their pets, it's the same scenario. That's their life is their pet. They go to work and they come home to their kid, and their kid has been patiently waiting on the couch, staring at the door since they left. Well, and then there's some people out there. I know some people that have sick dogs or sick animals, and they literally are, baby feeding them every day and making sure they're paying a lot of money on, surgeries. And, this is the stuff that, not saying it didn't happen back then, but this is becoming more frequent.
No, and it absolutely is, Nick. And I want to go a little bit further on that. I actually have some knowledge on the funeral home side where there was a funeral home that their son became a veterinarian, and he opened a pet crematory. And his dad goes, I don't think this is going to work. And his son was like, I'm going to add this pet crematory right next door. And I'm not like spitballing you, Nick. Something like 60% they've had more business because of adding the pet crematory next door.
It's a niche, right? It's a niche that is becoming...
And they go there. They go to the house with suited up.
Yep.
And they pick up your cat, your dog, your horse, whatever. I don't want to specifically say that because I don't know how far they go.
Right.
Because we're from Ida, so like cows and stuff are pets too. But from what I hear, they go to your house, it's suited up, and take care of your dog and cat. Dick, no, I know you're wondering.
I am wondering, Ben.
What can you do for your pet right now?
Wow, that is such a great question. What can you do, Ben?
So there are companies that do pet cremations.
Mm-hmm.
There are companies that do pet funerals.
Right.
And there are, and you can actually put your pet as an obituary, which is a
in the
whole
paper
new thing. Yeah, in your local paper. So now it's like, okay, now we know we can do the same thing we can to a human.
Right.
So what do we do? How do we do it? And so Dad and I do get a lot of calls, not a lot of calls, but a couple of calls a year their pet dies in the house.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, what do we do? God, how do we do this? What I'm finding with most animals is they want to cremate. They want to cremate their dogs. They want to cremate their cats. They want to cremate.
What about taxidermy? What do you think of that?
You know, that hasn't come across much in
I think it's kind of
my
a lost art.
experience. I think it's obviously it's going to be more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea too is it's kind of like cremation in the fact of what do you do with it, right?
The cremains?
So like you might want the taxidermy
Gus, or Fruit Loop,
Guster, but are your kids going to want that?
Maybe. I think the most important thing, and we've talked about this with grief, is that it's so personalized for everybody. So let's say, I think about like your mom, right? And your mom is that one lady that is literally feeding her dog 4 times a day, hand feeding, giving him medicine 5 times a day, making sure that he's, eating the proper, food, which is $50 a month. And then she passes away. What do you do with that sick dog? Right?
And then are you
Pet,
responsible if you don't take care of that dog?
Well, is there guilt to that, right? This was like mom's golden child, and now I have either the option of putting it down or taking it in and being miserable.
I think as a parent, right? You should tell them it's okay if you want to get rid of Gus when I'm gone.
Why?
Why not, Nick? That's a lot of burden to put on your kids.
Well, but
so if Millie is like,
Gus
I don't want Gus
the
in
thought
my living
of
room.
Gus not staying in the family might be heartbreaking for that person.
I understand, but like that's a lot to put on your kids.
But I think the kids understand that.
Maybe? No, I don't
And
think
if
they
the
do.
kids don't understand that, then they hold on to Gus.
Or they get rid of Gus.
Or they get rid of Gus.
And Gus goes in the dumpster.
Maybe Gus goes dumpster diving. Who knows?
Just for our listeners, there are companies that will come and take care of your loved pets. From what I've heard, they are very professional. Like I said, they come in a suit and tie, and they take care of your loved pet just like they would your loved one. So I think it's time for the Q&As.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
All right, Q&As, Nicky boy.
Hit me with your best shot.
You ready?
Yeah.
I really need to vent and tell somebody about this. I had to put my sweet little boy Zoe to sleep today. Today was the last day that I could hold him. I took him in, and they sedated him. I cried, grief and happiness. For the first time in a while, he looked so peaceful. But all the while holding him, I couldn't help but think, what more could I have done for him? I have so many regrets. I have so much anger and sorrow in my heart right now. I'm so sorry that I couldn't do more to help you, buddy. Rest in peace, Zoe. How do you feel about Zoe, Nick?
I don't know, the psychology behind this, but I would state that for some people, losing a pet is just like losing a human, losing a sister or a brother, and especially if you're close to your pet. I think this is a case that comes up a lot in my experience with grief work. Is there's always guilt and shame associated with losing someone, whether it was I didn't spend enough time, or what if I would have spent more money, or what if I would have been
Take him into the vet.
What if I would have noticed, something that could have maybe saved their life? And the reality is we're human, right? The reality is we only have so much money. We only have so much time, and we only have so much patience and brain capacity. That's the best way I can put it. Meaning there is stuff you're going to miss as a human. There is hurdles that you're just not going to be able to get over. There is times when money is tight. Unfortunately, you have to survive to, take care of anybody else. So at the end of the day, when it comes to guilt and shame, I would like to challenge people on maybe flipping the lens a little bit on what are their capabilities. And so, yeah, maybe you could have done another surgery on this pet, this poor little Zoe. But what kind of life would that be for Zoe?
Well, let's be honest, Nick. Would have helped. Sometimes
Maybe.
That's the problem with pets. You can't tell how they feel. You don't know exactly if that's the main reason that they're...
And even if the surgery's going to work,
Yeah,
There's a lot of times where they'll give you numbers. They'll tell you, hey, maybe 40% of the time we do this, it actually helps the pet.
I'll be completely honest, and I'll put it on my own self. I was given a 50% that I could take my 6-year-old dog to Lansing and maybe save him.
Yeah,
save
right.
her. And I didn't, because I didn't want the 2.5 hours more that this dog is in so much pain, and that maybe the surgery comes out good, but then she's in that much pain still.
So then the question becomes, especially with pets, is are you doing these procedures to keep
For
this
you.
person alive for you or for them?
Correct.
And again, I understand that, this is your best buddy, your pal, the person that's always there for you when you've had a long day and bad day, and never judges you. And I understand that. I understand that there is definitely an attachment between humans and pets that I think for some people you can't even put into words, because it's through the worst times, the traumatic experiences, they're always there with you.
I'm gonna go a little further, Nick. I think that's a reason why dogs have such a small lifespan.
Well, they suck in all of
Is
our
because they have to take all of our
they suck in
Yes.
all of our depression and sadness and anger.
So the idea is, you're right. Is this pet living or existing? And I think that's the two different things.
Right. Yep. I think the important part is keep talking about it. I think the more you get it out, the more you're not going to sleep on it, and let it just bury into your subconscious, and that ends up destroying some people.
Something that may sound so easy, but such a small thing, is both of Nick and I have our first dog on a Christmas tree ornament, and we put her up every year. And I know it sounds like a small thing to not care about, but every year I'm like, oh, choo-choo. She's
part
back.
of the family, right? They become part of the. It's
back.
so funny.
She
You get
kills
them,
it.
You get them as little ones, like puppies or whatever, and at first you're like, oh my god, if you pee on the floor one more time, that's it.
Why do we get so
But
mad
then a
at that?
month later, you're like, this is my best friend,
Oh my gosh.
Sparky.
All right, Nick, here we go. Is it normal to not feel bad about pet loss after not living with your pet for years? A family member moved to another state years ago and took our pet with them. I cried when this happened, but recently the pet has passed away, and I don't grieve the death. Is this normal behavior? Anybody experiencing something similar?
So what I would say is that she says that she didn't grieve the death, but she already grieved for that animal, because she talks about how she was torn apart when the pet was taken away from her.
And that's probably more traumatic than the actual death.
I'm just saying, she already grieved for it's almost like she lost the pet before it actually died. So, and again, I'm not necessarily saying that, first of all, it's not right or wrong not to grieve.
Right.
Period. But I think, more importantly, I'd like you to think about, didn't you already grieve?
And
It says that you've already grieved. You said that you were torn apart when this dog was taken away from you. So in your mind, that was the end of that dog.
You know what, Nick?
Or cat, or what? I don't know if it was an animal.
I'm going to go hold in my pride here, and I think for one time you're right. When you said that, I felt it. When you said they've already grieved the loss of that dog.
Right.
Because it wasn't there anymore.
Well, and that's another thing that I think gets misinterpreted or lost in translation. Grief is, yes, it is definitely, you can definitely compare it to death, but it's also a death of anything, a loss of anything, a loss of a job, you're moving, your parents get divorced. Those are all situations which we grieve. It's not a death grieve, but it's a grief. When people hear the word grieve or grief, they think automatically it has to do with death.
No, I think you bring up a really cool thought that people wouldn't even think when they heard that. I didn't even think of that, but you brought it up, and she brings it up in it. Like, she tells you,
yeah,
I'm already grieving the fact that I lost this dog, and now I'm dealing.
It just might have been easier for her to separate from that dog at that point. The emotional attachment is not.
She already lost
there,
the dog. In her mind,
she
already lost the dog.
A better way to view, because she's probably so hurt that the animal is gone. We keep saying dog. She doesn't say dog. The animal is gone.
That's that. Yeah, that's us.
Is
because
that
we love
she
the dog.
literally separated herself from it again. So subconsciously, I think she already grieved the dog. Let's move on.
All right, here we go, Nick. I think it's almost time. My cat is 15. I held him tonight and simply cried while I hugged him to my chest. He's been my rock through so much. I've had him since I was 6. We grew up together. He was always a little supporter when my parents divorced. It's so hard to think about losing him, but I know I can't let him suffer. What are some things I can do to prepare for his loss? Go ahead, Nick.
Hold them close, man. Share the last moments you got with your loved ones, and I mean pets too, animals, friends, family, doesn't matter. I think it's so important, especially in the last couple of days, if you get that opportunity to know it's the last couple of days, to make it count. Be really, truly present with your animal. I would actually say one thing that might help you is to think back when you were 6 years old and that enjoyment and that love you originally had. Live that last 48 hours with this cat like you did when you were 6 years old. Hug it as much as you can. Don't worry about what other people are going to think. If you want to dress him up, if you want to just enjoy your last 48 hours. You know, one thing we didn't say in this episode, and I think this is super important, there's a lot of people out there that don't see pets as a big deal. So you might get 6 months of people actually caring about a death of like a family member that's human.
And feel free, if you have a comment because you don't understand it, like feel free to give a comment.
And let's be honest, jobs don't even allow you to take time off work for human deaths. Do you think they're going to do that for pets?
No, definitely not. And that's what's interesting is pets are, I think it's more and more, especially with the world of you feel secluded a lot of time. The pandemic is probably not helping the situation whatsoever because the idea is your pet might be the only person you can see right now.
And it's going to make attachments just so much stronger. Well, and a lot of people are working from home now.
And I want to make this very clear. Nick and I are big dog lovers. So feel free to leave dog pictures in the comments. And especially if they're Shih Tzus, Bichons, or Malteses. We're all about those. And he has a Malamute.
I have a Samoyed and a Beagle.
Sorry, Malamute.
So,
is that like,
Malamute?
Is that a ferret?
I did have two ferrets.
Nick did like two ferrets. He had two ferrets.
I had Radar and Sonar, or baby
awesome.
girl and big boy. I also had 2 chinchillas at a time.
And this is why nobody likes Nick.
Yeah.
So feel free to leave your comments if you have any like weird pets too. Like we'd love to hear. Like let's hear about your bats.
Ben and I are dog people, so I'm technically a lot of people.
We did have a cat, and her name was Oreo, and she was awesome, but
she ran away.
We don't know.
She ran away. She didn't like us too much.
All right. Anyways, thank you for tuning in.
You know what? Thank you for showing this podcast to your friends and subscribing and liking and being a part of our family because we hope to help. We're hoping that these conversations bring light to maybe some things that you haven't thought about or maybe just something that you're like, oh, maybe I need to go talk about that. Because we are going to talk about
death.
Because if you're not talking about death, then you ain't
living.